Hi, everybody. This is Jeff Fowler with the Apartment Owners Association, and I want to welcome you today. We're going to be covering how to properly prepare and serve a rent increase notice. And the new CPI came out recently, so we have the new rates, how much you can actually, the maximum allowable rent increases. We have that in a chart for you, and so we're able to share that. You can log in and see that. And if you notice now for regular rent increases, generally speaking, you'll be able to get the better rent increase because when they change for as of August 1st, you won't get as much in most cases. So anyway, this is good timing for this event. And San Jose, folks, thank you so much for being flexible and just being able to shift this to online. And a lot more people have been able to register for it, and also people will be able to see it at a later date. So thank you so much for being flexible with us, and our speaker as well. Thank you. And anyway, so it is a great day for sure. At AOA, we've been around for almost 50 years, and our goal is to help you make and or keep more money than ever before, and make the process of providing housing easier and more enjoyable for you. Unfortunately, what you don't know may cost you a fortune or a small fortune, and even doing a rent increase notice properly could really be the difference in that. And anyway, so we're excited about today's content. You may have missed the member orientation we did just about a month ago. You can catch that on our YouTube channel at any time. We've had some live events, in-person events that were great just recently. We'd love to see you guys attend those. And we just, people really get a lot of benefit out of those when we do have them. And the in-person, we do have Buena Park coming up next week, and that's how to complete the rental agreement or lease agreement in Orange County. And then the next day in San Gabriel Valley, we'll be doing the same thing. And a lot of it is exactly the same. There are some small nuances um, for specifically rent-controlled cities, and so we're trying to cover everything and help you understand all that. And a lot of you already do understand it because you've been doing it for years. But anyway, always looking when you log into the program or membership program, you'll see the forms and they're grouped, and look in city-specific forms because look for your city, click on it, and there'll be a drop down of the different forms that are required in that city. And yeah, because there's so many variations, but today we're going to be our speaker will specifically cover San Jose, that area, kind of the area that they cover. And so they may share some things that are specific there and just understand that. And then tomorrow, we're going to we're going to talk about Prop 13 and the battle over property taxes. John Kupal is going to be our speaker. And then you know what? That's at noon. And then at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we're going to be talking about AB 2042. This is a bill that's kind of making its way through, and it's super, super sneaky. It's supposed to be a cleanup bill for AB 747, which is about process serving, but it is not that. It would actually unravel default judgments from up to 10, 15 years ago, even. And it would set those judgments aside. So this is just a crazy bill. Normally, we don't cover stuff that's just working its way through. Normally, we just do political action stuff. But this one, it's advanced further and it's flown under the radar. So we just wanted to talk about it. We had a key win here in LA County. We've been really pushing, and we had a campaign for in activating everybody to get there was a price gouging ban, really not price gouging, but even for a vacated unit, we weren't allowed to raise it up more than 10%. That went away yesterday, so I want to give you all a high five that participated in that. So this 2042, I think we're going to win. I think we're going to be able to get this thing killed, but it will take participation. on our PAC website, we do have very clear instructions on how to oppose it. So you could go to that at any point, and that website is PAC, PAC dot AOAUSA.com. And anyway, so PAC, Political Action Committee, PAC.AOAUSA.com. So AOA USA is our regular website. Just put PAC with a dot on the front of it, and you'll see a campaign there for that. And anyway, so we've had a couple wins. Orange County, we had a win. And so things are going great here. June 4th, we're going to have an attorney cover how to handle problem tenants. June 18th, smart tax strategies. So those are just a few of the things going on, a whole lot going on. We just updated our plumbing agreement, several different forms. Please always use the newest forms because we are constantly keeping those updated. And anyway, so our speaker today, really, she just, every time she gives us so much great information. And she has over 20 years of experience handling problem tenants with complex landlord-tenant matters. She grew up under in a family with her father being an eviction attorney. So she's lived this stuff her whole life. So it's way more than just 20 years. She works closely with self-managing housing providers like yourself, property managers, realtors to enforce lawful rights of possession. Her expertise include California's Tenant Protection Act, local rent control ordinances in her area, residential and commercial tenancies, tenant occupied listings, and government subsidized housing. So everybody, if you could, we'll turn it over here to Anne Michelle Francis. Thank you so much for being with us today and taking time to help our members.
Of course, thank you. Am I on? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're great.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Let's see. I need to be able to share. Jeff, can you give me share permission, please? And I will get my presentation up here. So just 1 second. And doesn't look like it's coming up. Hold on. Probably don't want to see my email inbox, although all of you may actually exactly want to see my email inbox. Okay, good morning. I'm Anne Michelle Francis, and today we're talking about preparing and serving rent increase notices. So before we get started, let's share who I am. So first of all, I am not an attorney. I do not give legal advice. This is for general informational purposes only. I am a legal document assistant, an unlawful detainer assistant, a senior paralegal for currently Martin Letnich. I was a paralegal for my father for 18 years, who is attorney Dan Paris, in case any of you know who he was, who he is. He retired 3 years ago, and I began Blueprint Evictions and began working with a different supervising attorney, Mr. Letnich. And he handles all of the eviction cases, and I handle all of the notices. So I am also a licensed real estate agent and property manager. And so I have a lot of background in property management as well as real estate, so that I can help serve my clients better, which are my self-managing landlords and property managers. So my quick legal disclaimer, this is for informational purposes only. This is not legal advice. This is not intended to be legal advice. If you need legal advice, make sure you contact an attorney who works in the city and county your property is located in. Our office serves San Mateo, Santa Clara, Santa Cruz, and San Benito counties. So if you do need help in those areas, we can help. If you need help in other areas, it's possible I can refer you to someone, or it's possible my attorney would be willing to go to those areas. So you can send us an email at info@blueprintevictions.com and we can let you know. So I'm going to get right to it today. I want to be able to, I think one of my things that is my secret sauce is that I try and make things as simple as possible. So the law is extremely complex, and I try and break it down into what you need to know. Yes, it can go on and on and on, and lots of different variations of lots of things, but the majority of the time, a self-managing landlord needs to just know the basics. So we're going to talk about a 30-day rent increase notice versus a 90-day. I want to start by saying there is no 60-day rent increase notice anymore. You could give a 60-day out of common courtesy instead of a 30-day notice, but you can't give a 60-day instead of a 90-day notice when you're increasing rent anymore. So we'll start with the 30-day. So you serve a 30-day notice to increase the rent when you are increasing the rent less than 10%. So 10% inclusive or less is when you can serve a 30-day notice of rent increase. Now, I want to be careful because that date is not exact. It sounds like it could be exact, and in certain situations it could be exact, but do not assume it's exact. Do not assume that if you want to raise rent on July 1st, you can send a notice on June 1st. That assumption is not going to be safe. So I'll walk you through how to do that, but know that it is a minimum 30-day rent increase. It is not a strict 30-day rent increase. It depends on service. So when you issue a rent increase notice, it must be in writing. You cannot issue it verbally. Text is not a valid form of communication. Email, I would say don't do it. But if you have done it, it's possible, it's okay, as long as the tenant paid the increased rent was valid and effective, and they continue to pay it after that. And I look at everything in terms of, would I start an eviction on it in court and be confident that the tenant knew that that's what the rent was? That's my frame of mind in doing it. And so I would be willing to start an eviction in that situation, but do not serve notices by email or by text. That is just not a professional way to do it. AOA has forms, and if I have time, then I'll go through how to fill out that form. But you want to put it in writing. You want to say the effective date of the rent increase. You need to clearly state when it's effective, but more importantly, you need to have the date that you are giving it to them on the form so that you can make sure that that lines up with the effective date. Because if you have an incorrect effective date, then the entire notice is null and void. And you don't want to do that because you're spending your time on setting the notice up. And if the notice ends up being null and void, and you find out a year later that you didn't give the proper increase or you didn't give the proper notice, then that means that the tenant can go back to what the rent was before you gave them that rent increase because you gave an invalid notice. It doesn't mean, oh, well, then we'll just reduce it to what it should have been or change the due date to what it should have been. No, it goes all the way back to there was no rent increase at all. And now the tenant has a credit in the event that they have overpaid anything. So we'll talk about that more too. But because I usually have your attention for about the first 2 to 3 minutes of a presentation, I want to make sure that you're aware of that before I get started. So there's that 30-day rent increase, 10% or less, must be written notice, effective date clearly stated. It can be served personally or by mail. If mailed, I have on here 5 to 10 days. I will actually pull up the code that applies to that, and we'll get to that in a second. First, I wanted to address the 30 versus the 90 days. So 30 is for when it's under 10% or less. Now the 90-day, only difference here is it's when the rent increase is 10% or more. Now some of you may be thinking, wait a second, you can't even increase the rent 10% or more. And that's not necessarily true. That depends on if there is a local rent ordinance or not. And it depends on whether it's covered by AB 1482 or not. And AB 1482 has 2 components to it. There is an eviction component, which is called just cause, and there's a rent control component. So it doesn't mean that just because your property is covered by just cause, doesn't mean it's also covered by rent control. 2 completely separate things, but it's under the same umbrella. Now, if your property is not covered by any of those, not covered by a local rent control ordinance, not covered by AB 1482, then a 90-day could apply because you can increase the rent more than 10%. If you do that, again, must be in writing, clear effective date must be clearly stated, it must be served personally or by mail, and if mailed, you're adding 5 to 10 days. So you want to be careful about the date that you write on the letter saying that that's when you're giving it to someone. I often see this in my line of work is that landlords give me copies of their rent increase notices and it says when it becomes effective and the old rent and the new rent, but it doesn't say the date that the notice was signed or given. And some of these notices are several years old and the owner doesn't remember anymore. So you have to make sure that you are dating it when you gave it to the tenant so that we can determine if it really is effective or not. So I'm going to refer to Civil Code 827 because because it says personally served or by mail. Now, normally when we talk about process serving, when we're serving notices or serving evictions, there are 3 forms of service, which are personal, subserve, or posted mail. Now, this civil code says personally or by mail. So those are the 2 options that I'm going with here. So personally means, and I want to I want to be clear in what this means because often landlords misinterpret what personally means. Often they think that they personally, as a landlord, went to the property and no one was there, and so they stuck it on the door. That is not a personal serve. A personal serve is when somebody goes to the property, speaks to a named tenant on the rental agreement, and hands it to them. That is a personal serve. But instead, if you go there and no one answers the door, then you're not personally serving it. So you can stick one on the door, just like a post-it mail if you're serving a notice, and you also need to mail one by regular mail. So then that means putting it in the mail with a stamp on it. So what does that mean? This refers to section 1013 of the Code of Civil Procedure. So the reason that I'm mentioning this is because these particular code sections is because often clients say, well, what if I do this and what if I do that? Well, it doesn't say that. The law doesn't actually say to do it that way, so we do it the way that the law says to. It also doesn't say to send it by certified mail. We never recommend to send anything by certified mail, even though some of the laws do say you can send things by certified mail, because really the only thing that you prove when you send something by certified mail to a tenant is that they didn't pick it up, because they very rarely pick it up. It's just an extra headache. They're not home. No, when are you ever home when the mail's dropped off? And the mailman actually can get you to sign something for certified mail even if you want it. It's very rare and you have to plan your day around it. So to expect that a tenant is also going to be ready and willing and excited to get a letter from their landlord by certified mail, usually there's nothing positive inside of that, and so they don't want to get that. So don't send it by certified mail. I am going to mention what service by mail means because I mentioned before 5 to 10 days. So I want to be specific about what that 5 to 10 days means so that you can properly calculate the start date and effective date of your rent increase notice. And this is really important right now because, as Jeff said, the new CPI numbers have come out. And so if you increase the rent with an effective date after August 1st, 2026, so if you zoned out for a second, come back. If you plan to increase the rent after August 1st, 2026, then you are going to have a lower increase than if you increase the rent prior to August 1st. So that means you're running out of time here. You only have a June 1 date, and that's not possible. And you have a July 1 date, which may or may not be possible depending on how much you want to raise your rent. So, well, if it's CPI and if it's AB 1482, then you still have one more date that you can still do that by. Actually, no, you can't, can you? June, July. No, we can't. So this is to be mindful of what that amount is. No, you can. Under 30 days is under 10% is that 30-day notice. So yes, you can still get your 30-day notice of rent increase in before the CPI amount drops as of August 1st for any rent increases after that. So let's figure out what that calculation is for any rent increase notices you'd want to do now. But part of that calculation is the effective date, and effective date is dependent on the service date. So if we read this Civil Code of Procedure section, it refers to services complete at the time of deposit. We personally want to see postmarks. Now that the post office is doing different things with the mail service, and you don't necessarily know when something's going to be postmarked, it's best to go into the post office if you need to mail something and have it date stamped the day that you intend to put it in the mail, so it's clear that that's the date that it was mailed. And in addition to that, when you are mailing it out, let's see, so it says it's 5 calendar days from the date of mailing, in addition to your 30-day notice. If you are mailing it out within the state of California. Okay, that's where the 5 days come from. Now, let's say you're a landlord in Arizona and your property is in California, and so you're mailing it from Arizona. If you're mailing it from Arizona, you still get the postmark in Arizona, but you're adding 10 days to your effective date instead of only 5. That's where the 5 to 10 days comes from. And I do mention this because a lot of people own property in California and don't live here anymore. And so it is worth it to say that. Now, there are lots of other conditions if you're mailing it from out of the country and all that, and I didn't include that. I'm only including in-state and out-of-state. So if you're mailing it from within California, you add 5 days to your effective date. So instead of a 30-day notice, it's a 35-day notice. And if you're mailing it from outside California, it's not a 30-day notice, it's a 40-day notice. Okay. So that's something that you want to keep in mind as you're preparing for your last rent increases under this higher CPI. So I have about 3 red flags on rent increases. So if the property is covered by a local rent control ordinance or AB 1482, you are limited to a maximum increase per year. It can be anything from 5% to 5% plus CPI, depending on what the rent local rent ordinance is. I don't follow San Francisco at all. I'm only really speaking to my areas, which are Santa Clara, San Benito, Santa Cruz, and San Mateo counties. So within those areas, it's not going to be more than that. There may be other areas in California where the rent increase or the annual increase maximum is lower than that, but I'm not familiar with those because those aren't counties that I serve. But if there is a local rent control ordinance, then you need to make sure that you are abiding by those rules instead of AB 1482. Or if AB 1482 applies, then you need to abide by that unless AB 1482 doesn't. But if one of those rent controls or AB 1482 applies, then you can only increase the rent, let's say 5%, but is the maximum. So let's say that your first rent increase is 2.5%. Well, you can only raise it that year 2.5% more. So you can only have a maximum of that percentage in every 12 months. So that's the maximum you can do it. And if you have not raised the rent in, say, 3 to 5 years, they are not banked anymore. You cannot save all of those and then increase them later and say, oh, but I haven't raised it for 5 years, so now I want to catch up. There's no catch up anymore. You need to be really careful about doing anything like that and making sure that you talk to someone who specializes in your city and county before you do that. Really important in subsidized housing, such as Section 8, all rent increases must first go through the program for approval before you can issue a rent increase. I often see landlords just send the rent increase to the tenant and to Section 8. They don't get the approval from Section 8, and then they expect someone, I don't know who, to keep on paying. Well, the way that it works is that Section 8 determines how much the tenant can afford, and then they decide, then the tenant has their portion that they pay, and Section 8 pays the other amount. Well, if you're telling the tenant you owe me this, then you're not giving Section 8 the ability to determine if the rent increase is valid or not. That's first. And then second, if the tenant's portion needs to change or not. So you never go directly to the tenant on that. You go directly to the administrator of the program, see if it's approved, they'll reassess, and then they will let you know if it's approved or not and what the new allocations will be between Section 8 and the tenant. Actually, and it's just worth noting back on Section 8 again, never ever accept side money under the table from a Section 8 tenant who really wants your house. If Section 8 approved a $2,300 a month rental, but the tenant wants the $2,500 a month rental, and they say that they're going to pay you the extra $200, even though Section 8 has determined that they pay $0 or $5 or $350 or whatever, and they want to pay you an extra $200 on top of what they are already paying through Section 8, that is illegal. If you have been doing that, consider those rental credits, and you should be crediting the tenants for all of those overpayments. You can get in trouble for something like that. I don't see it that often anymore, but I used to see it a lot. So be aware that if a tenant if it's not part of the program, then you cannot take the extra, even if they say that they won't tell anyone. And also what I mentioned in the beginning, failure to give proper notice voids the increase completely. So if you give notice and say this is effective in 30 days, but you mailed it from Arizona, then it's not an effective rent increase notice. And so if we're doing a 3-day notice for non-payment of rent and I ask you for your leases and your rent increases and make sure that everything's valid and it's not, and I say, wait, this doesn't match up, this rent increase, we may go back and say we have to go back to the original rent and you have to credit the tenant for any overpayment of rent that they've made, which is that difference between the old rent and the new rent, because that rent increase is not valid. I normally don't catch them on things like mailings. It's usually an owner who serves a notice, say mid-February, and says your rent will be increased March 1st. Well, a 2-week notice is not valid. And so I'll be able to catch something like that. But most of the time, courts and everything, they're not going through and looking in detail with the mail. However, with AI, as good as it is, it's entirely possible that your tenant can run their entire case through AI and say, poke out all the holes, and then you have a whole lot of holes being poked, and then maybe they can pull out those mailing dates and pull that out as the inconsistency and make it invalid. So be careful there, because on a 3-day for non-payment of rent, if the rent you're demanding is over by even a penny, then your entire case is thrown out. So you don't want to waste all of that time and money on something that could have been avoided by having an effective notice. I do want to just reference the civil code for AB 1482 rent control, because again, as I mentioned before, there are 2 components to AB 1482. There is the rent control and there's just cause. And I have a little chart that I created that kind of goes through it. that goes through both to show what some of the nuances are there. But this, in summary, refers to not being able to raise the rent more than twice in any 12-month period, even if you're raising it within the correct parameters. You can't raise it every quarter or anything like that. Even if you're doing it under the 10% and within the 5% plus CEI, you're limited to a maximum of 2%, 2 times per year. So when we're talking about rent control, and we usually are talking about AB 1482, but it's not to be forgotten that there are lots of other rent control ordinances. Sure, we know San Jose, sure, we know Mountain View, and they have their own rent registries. So if you have apartments in those areas and you don't know about the rent registry and you've never heard of it, that is the first thing you should do even while we're on this call, you should go to those and register your apartments. They should already be on it. I'd be shocked if they're not. And that's where you should be uploading notices and things like that too. Lots of other programs have rent mediation programs. They have different types of programs like Campbell and Sunnyvale and Milpitas. They all have different versions of tenant protection programs. Some of them are tied to eviction, some of them are tied to rent control. So it is up to you as a landlord to learn and identify all of the programs that your properties are covered by. Typically, self-managing landlords, I've seen that they can successfully manage maybe under 15 on their own before they really need to get a property manager to start handling for them. And usually when they're managing those, they typically are all in the same city. So you need to become a professional on your city. And if it's San Jose or Mountain View, it's like you need to take an entire college course on learning about those particular rules. But if it's something outside of that, usually something like Sunnyvale or Campbell, it's a PDF, maybe a few pages, and it references AB 1482, but you can really read it and understand it and figure out what all of your rules are. And that's imperative for you to do if you don't know what the rules are for your city that you own rental properties in. If you don't want to do that, if you're above that, if you say, no, I don't need to worry about that, then hire a property manager, because it just doesn't make any sense for you to not know the laws. If you are in the business of self-managing properties, the rents are just too high and the risks are too high and the lawsuits are too expensive for you to do it without knowing the laws inside and out, because there is no, you can't say, well, you can't feign ignorance when you're in court. You say, well, I didn't know. You can't be an accidental landlord. You could say, well, I was doing this to help them. A judge doesn't care about those. And so it's up to you to know what your properties are covered by and what they're not. So if there's a rent control ordinance, you need to find that out and you need to become an expert in it if you're continuing to manage your property on your own. If it's not covered by a local rent control ordinance, then you need to check, is it covered by AB 1482 or not? My next slide here is going to show you my quick and dirty sheet as of January 2020. So this is an older qualifier that I don't believe has changed. But if you look here on the rent control side, so that's really the one I want you to focus on, the AB 1482 rent control, so RC versus AB 1482 JC. So I want you to notice there are differences between units that are and are not covered by the rent control component and the just cause component. And it just depends. There are certain things just depend. And so I go into it because when you have a self-managing landlord, there are lots of different scenarios. It's not just you own a single family home or a triplex. It's you rent rooms in a house, or you have multiple houses where there's a master lessor and someone else rents other rooms, or there are permitted ADUs or unpermitted. And so lots of different variations there. So, but I'm going to throw an example in here. So for example, a duplex is covered under AB 1482 as rent control unless it is owner occupied. That is the same as just cause. So you have to have a reason, a no fault just cause reason to evict a tenant or to remove a tenant or give a termination notice in a duplex, unless it's owner occupied. Then there's the exception. And with owner occupied on both rent control and just cause, it's owner occupied based on the time that the tenant moved in. So if when the tenant moved in, both sides were tenant occupied, then that's what prevails. If the owner occupied at the time the tenant moved in, then that's what prevails. So keep that in mind. Again, condos and townhomes, those are exempt by both. Apartments, 3 units or more are covered. And this is kind of a quick and dirty sheet. I don't mention things like if the property was built within the last 15 years. It's just not very common in our area that properties are built within the last 15 years. So it's just rare. Yes, that is an exception to the rule. But I also want to mention, and that's why I bring this qualifier up, is that If you are exempt from AB 1482 because you have given the proper notice of exemption, that does not mean that you're exempt from rent control. They are two separate things. And so you can't be exempt from rent control on certain things. And likewise, a single family home, if you issued that notice of exemption saying you're exempt from the Tenant Protection Act's just cause, there is no rent control on the single family home under AB 1482, even if you didn't issue the proper notice of exemption. If you did issue the proper notice of exemption, then it's also exempt from rent control. But even if you didn't issue that notice of exemption, it's not covered by rent control. So that's the one exception to rent control versus just cause. Just cause, you have to have issued that exemption notice to be exempt. Rent control, you're either covered by it or you're not, and it has nothing to do with the rent control piece. You can't take back, you can't make something covered by rent control if it's not, is what I'm saying. So back to rent control. So back to my 1, 2, 3. So third is if none of the above, so if it's either a local rent control or it's not for AB 1482, then the landlord can increase any rent amount within the 30 and 90-day notice requirement. So if the owner wants to increase the rent 45%, they can with a 90-day notice requirement. And the reason why is because then the tenant can say, I don't want to live here anymore. And they can turn around with a 30 or 60-day notice saying, I'm leaving, because that's unreasonable. And so they can do that. Now, I often see landlords say, well, and I'm going to raise the rent so that they want to leave. And when landlords say that, that's concerning, because the reason a landlord wants a tenant to leave is typically because they're arguing about something. Something's not going the way that they want anymore. And so now they're mad at the tenant. They want the tenant out. And so they say, well, I'm going to raise the rent a bunch. Or often the tenant's not paying rent at all. And they say, well, I'm going to raise the rent a bunch. And I don't really understand what that does, but some landlords truly believe that if they raise the rent a bunch, then their tenants will move out because they say, well, I can't afford it anyways. So that's just a thing that I see some people do. So in terms of AB 1482 rent increase limits, you can raise it annually. You can raise it 5% plus CPI up to a maximum of 10% annually. So every 12 months is something where you probably want to think about having an alert on your calendar so that you're just raising everybody's rents annually, annual. So every 12 months, so that you don't forget about it and then say, oh, wait, it's been 18 months, I haven't raised it. However, I say that with a caveat because you should be running comps. 5% plus CPI is actually a lot of money on certain homes in California, depending on the rental market. So if you are actually raising the rent up to 10% every year, you may be pricing that property out of the market. And so you may have tenants leave. You may have a property that's vacant longer because you can't get people at that rent that you think that it should be at. And you may end up lowering your rent. But when you have turnover and your property is vacant even in a month, you've lost $2, $3, $4, $5,000 just 1 month because you wanted to get an extra 5%, 8%, whatever it was, but that wasn't even what the market was warranting for that rent anymore. So make sure that if you are annually doing your rent increases, which you should, or you should at least be looking at it every year, you should be running the comps to make sure that they're still matching and then you're not getting ahead. Now, the exception to that is something like San Jose, rent control where it's 5% per year. And most of those properties are already so low that 5%, it's going to take 30 years to even get them up to market rate. And even then, that's market rate from 30 years ago. It's not even market rate for what it'll be in 30 years. So there's certain ones where, yes, you should just keep doing it, but you have to think about what that base is in the beginning. So consider the source and consider your property. So again, under 1482, rent can't be increased more than 2 increments over a 12-month period, up to a maximum of 10%. And CPI is based on the metro area. So I have, this is actually, hold on just a second. I just lost all of you. Can you all hear me okay? Because I just lost my computer screen. So whole area. Okay. Sorry about that. So it's based on that CPI. And so I want to talk about the CPI for a minute. And I do have a chart here to show you what the CPI is for this before August number. So how to determine the rent increase and what the CPI is. So I want to emphasize that just because you see a CPI number, so Jeff is going to has a CPI number in the AOA portal, and then There's also CPI numbers that you may see floating around. Okay. And you need to make sure that it's in the right county for your area or the right metro area, but you also want to make sure that you're doing it within the correct dates. So if you intend to increase the rent on or before August 1st, so typically rent is due the first of the month, you can't issue a change of terms that will become effective in the middle of the month. It needs to become effective on the due date of the rent. So if it's due the first, the effective date is the first. So let's say that it's July. So you have a rent increase that will be effective as of July 1st. So that's before August 1st. Then you're going to use the April CPI number from 2025. Okay, and if you have an increase on or after August 1st, 2026, then you're going to use the new CPI number that was published this year, and Jeff has that number. So my example here is if you are doing an increase between August 1st and July 31st, 2026, then you're going to use the metro area as a 1.2% increase. And so the maximum allowable is 6.3%. Now, this is a random example. I'm actually going to give you an example based on what the San Mateo, Santa Clara, Santa Cruz, San Benito numbers were. So if you wanted to do this now, these rent increases could take effect before August 1st. So as you can see on here, it's a 5% plus the CPI increase is 3.8 to 3.8% is what it is up through August 1st, 2026. And after that, it's 1.3. And then over here for Santa Clara, Santa Cruz, San Benito is 3.8 and then 2.7. So a little bit higher in that area versus San Mateo. Okay, so depending on when you give it, you can give an 8.8 increase to after August is 6.3 increase, or for these other counties is an 8.8 versus a 7.7. And Jeff indicated that on the member website there are these numbers so that you can figure out exactly how to calculate that. If you're intimidated by rent increases, I can do it for you. Or you can schedule a consultation and I can walk you through how to do it for each of your properties. And so you can schedule a consult with me at blueprintevictions.com/consultation. I also want to mention that I have a new secret podcast that I'm starting on Spotify that actually is launched on Spotify called Your Eviction Blueprint. It is the 10-step eviction process. Each audio is about 20 to 30 minutes walking you in detail through the eviction process. It does not tell you how to do it. It tells you all of the things involved in the eviction. So as you're going through it, you understand the complexities without needing to talk to someone else about it. And it's a way for us to continue holding your hand because we have done this for a very long time. So if you want access to that, I'm actually closing free access to that today at 5 p.m. So you can send me an email to info@blueprintevictions.com. And this is how you can reach me. Jeff, if we have time, I can go through your rent increase notice and we can take a look at that too. Oh, it depends on what your time's like. But I can go through the rent increase notice and show people how to fill that out.
Yeah, please do that. That'd be great.
Okay, perfect. Let me stop sharing. Okay, give me a second while I pull up that one. Okay, so this is the AOA's change of terms. And so this is sorry, what was that?
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, so this is the general change of terms. And so it's not necessarily a rent increase form. So when you're looking for it in the AOA member site, it's 30-day notice to change the terms of your rental agreement. And one of those reasons you can change the terms is rent increase. I'm also just going to throw this in there because often people need to add rules or regulations to their properties because maybe things have changed or people are complaining about things. This is the type of form you would use for that to let people know that the rules or regulations are going to become effective in X number of days, in 30 days. So this is going to be a great agreement for that. So you're going to put the tenant's name, all of the tenants' names in the 2-line. And I've talked about this before. You want to go through the application, make sure you have all the adult names on it. You want to go through the rental agreement, make sure you have all adult names on it, as well as all the occupants in the property. Anyone whose name you know that's over the age of 18, you want to let them know that they're all responsible for the increased rent. If anyone has ever paid the rent, They actually have permission to live in the property too. So if you have some adult kids in there that also pay the rent or give you some cash every now and then, they need to be told too, because you don't later want to come back and say, oh, but I gave you that rent increase. They say, wait a second, you didn't give it to me. So it doesn't apply to me. So you have to make sure you're naming all adults, not just the head of household who signed the lease, all adults in the property. If one adult left and another's there, then make sure you're naming the proper adults too. So you're going to put in the apartment number, the street address. I'll say Campbell and okay. And then take notice. So this is where you're going to have your effective date. So we've been talking about rent increases for July on here. So let's say that it's July because that'll be the last date that you'll be able to get in this old CPI number that we talked about. So let's do July 1st, 2026. And we're going to say the monthly rent is going to increase from, let's say 2,000. And I'm gonna go back to my slides and see what my CPI was on that. For Santa Clara County, it was 8.8%. So I'm gonna take my 2,000 times 0.828%. And so 165.60. Hold on, host asked me to start my video. I'm not sure what that means. Is there something I should be clicking there, Jeff?
I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Permit to, and so the increase is 165.60. So it's going to be 2. And then here. Okay, so that's the increase. So I took that CPI number that I mentioned before that was on my other slides, which is 8.8% if I'm doing it before August 1st, 2021. I'm sorry, 2026, and putting it in here. Now, in the alternative, if I wait till August 1st, then it's only going to be 7.7%. So if I needed to do that number instead, obviously that'd be it. So what kind of numbers are we looking at here? 2,000 times 7 is $154. So we're not talking about a huge difference. It's only a couple dollars. So if you end up seeing this later, then you're not missing anything huge, but it's just to be aware that that number could change depending on the rent that's owed. So that's how you fill that out. And then you're going to say today's 5/20/26. 5/20/26. I guess I should have written that in May 20th, 2026. And then you sign that. And I'm not saying that right here, but you're going to add your proof of service. And this is really, really important, especially because they need to know how you served it and they need to be able to calculate those dates. So if you intend to go to the property and serve it, then you need to serve it to somebody in person. And if no one's there prepared to put it on the door and prepared to mail it, or you can just mail it, or you can post it and mail it. So it's up to you. But if you do mail it, then make sure that you have that extra 5-day buffer. So right now where we're at, which is May 20th, if for a July 1st date, it's not a big deal. There's obviously not enough time for a 30-day notice for a June 1st date, but you definitely have more than enough time for that July 1st date. And because of the extra 5 days that you have for mailing it, you right now would be fine for the July 1st date. You have more than enough time. So how would I fill this out? So again, I'm going to put the tenants' names, copy my tenants' names up here, put them back down here. And then this depends on how you're serving it. So if you're personally delivering it, so you hand it to them, you go to the address that they're at, which is the 123 Easy Street Apartment 4, and you hand it to whoever it is. I would still note who you handed it to if you handed it to Jane or you handed it to John. Or you could also leave it with a subserve, but again, if it's a substituted service, so you leave it with someone else who's not named on the rental agreement, who's over the age of 18, you're also mailing a copy, and then the mailing is the trigger there. It's not handing it to somebody because you didn't hand it to a person who's named. Instead, it's the mail trigger. So then it's 5 days if you're mailing it from state to state. Or you can post it on the door and mail it, which again would trigger that 5 days if you're obviously in the state because you're posting it and then also mailing it. But you also are able to just mail it in the event that it is a change of terms notice. Okay. And I don't know where I went. Something happened with my computer screen here. So I swear I'm here, but apparently just my name is. So
Oh, I
things
see. Yeah, I see. Like if you hit your video again, then you would show up. But I wonder if you could try to hit it on your regular computer again. I don't know if it's gonna give us the,
there
or
we
I think
go.
maybe Anthony can take care of it from here. But thank you so much. What we're going to do now, we have some people that are watching that are like in on the Zoom call. And so for you guys, I want to invite you to raise your hand. If you kind of hover over the screen. Oh, look, great. Perfect. We got both of us on there. And got your phone number, the 408-260-2253. Is that right for you?
Uh, Were you talking to me?
Yeah, the 408-260-2253.
Yes. Yes. Sorry. Office
Okay.
number. Yes.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
we got your email, got the website, got your phone number there. All that's great. If you're watching in the Zoom call right now, if you at the bottom, raise your hand and we will call on you and ask you to unmute yourself and take your question if you would like to do that. And there's a little raise hand icon there if you're on your computer. And if not, we can just take questions that are in the chat. So we do have one question here. They're asking if you could elaborate rent increase in two phases below AB 1482 limits, say 2.5% plus another 2.5% within a 12-month period.
I mean, it's not something that I recommend. It's something that I see self-managing landlords do. It's not something you need to do. Property managers don't ever do that. They do things on an annual schedule so that everything goes at the same time. The way they generally maintain it is they know when people move in, and so they have these expiration dates and they know when it's time for the annual increase. So it's just more work and it leaves more room for error if you do it in that manner. I don't recommend it, but if you do that, you are able to
Right.
increase a maximum of CPI plus 5% or 5% plus CPI every 12 months. So I would say it's more of a safety where if you only increased it 5% because you thought that that's what the rent control was, and then you later found out, oh, I actually can raise it up to 8.8%, then you can get that extra amount in
Mhm.
within that 12 months. But you need to be mindful because now when is your start date? And then when are you increasing those 12 months? So be careful. And again, self-managing landlords often hear something from somewhere and then think they can just apply it versus a property manager where they know the laws behind it and they know why they're doing it. And so you need to be really careful when you just hear something. So, yes, you can do more than one increase a year. I don't recommend it.
Yeah, I don't recommend it either. Again, getting back to simplicity, you're making it more simple for yourself and for other people, for sure. So, all right. And then other questions here. Is this form only for rent, right? And so you addressed that a little bit. So it can be a change of terms. One question I've heard people ask, like, hey, there's this whole um, mandatory appliance thing, and if this is a rent increase, should you also be putting that notice in there that, you're supplying or the tenant has supplied? What do you think about that? Just curious.
I I like change of terms for I just like putting things in writing. I mean, that's just how I operate. There are way too many people that want to start evictions because and nothing's in writing. I have probably 5 on my desk right now where it's they want to evict someone for breach of contract and there's nothing in writing telling the tenants what the rules were in the first place. So how do you evict a tenant when they don't know the rules and it's not in writing? I bet if you put it in writing, they would be violating it. So it's one of those things. Like, do you want to put it in writing so that they don't violate it? Or do you not want to tell them and then get mad at them later on because they're violating it? So the more communication, the better. But using the change of terms for updating the rental agreement is great also. So typically, and the laws change, and it depends on the county, it depends on the judge and things like that. But if there's a change of terms to a rental agreement, you typically don't need the tenant to sign it. And you can issue a change of terms of
Right.
tenancy, put it
Hmm.
on that notice, and then send it. And that is valid. And then you're complying along with the mailing and the personal service, as long as you've gotten it to them with the correct effective date in the right amount of time.
Hmm.
So that's valid. Sure, it's great if you also get something signed, but you don't need to. And so that's what this 30-day change of terms is for. It's really powerful.
Great, great, great. And I just spoke with the process server today, and he said just yesterday on an eviction case, they challenged the postmark date. Just so you're just so that's out there for people. That's kind of like a newsy type of thing. And it was literally one that he had served on, and so that's how he had information on that. But it actually didn't matter because there was the time period between the time that they actually initiated the lawsuit, so it didn't even matter. And so in most cases, it's not going to. But in bringing that up, with that postmark date, is this going to be something that people should calculate extra time for if they're mailing this? And because it's when the United States Postal Service processing center gets it, that's when they're putting the mark on it. So should they, is there what would you say to that question?
My understanding is if you go and stand in line at the post
Just
office, they will stamp it. So
right.
if you're sending out your rent increases, and again, that's why it's nice to do them all at the same time. Maybe annually everyone gets a rent increased August 1st or July 1st or whenever that is. And so you go down there and have them all postmarked at the same time, or you have your own machine. That's obviously something more law office or property management group. They would have their own machines with the
Mhm.
postmark dates on it. But I wouldn't just take a chance and put it in a blue bin because you have no idea unless you have an increase date of July 1st and you're putting it in the mail today. Like I
Right.
wouldn't be worried about that. The mail service is actually quite effective. I've
Mhm.
I don't know the last time mail was actually lost. And most tenants say that they never received anything anyways. So they never received notices. They didn't get it in the mail. They didn't get it on their door. That's typically what they always say. So the more you can do to prove that you did do it, I've even seen people stand there with the envelope in the blue mailbox and take a picture. And then that's time and date stamped on their phone. Now that hasn't been tried in court, but I can see that they actually physically put it in the mail. I mean, why would they do that and not mail it? And
Yeah.
no landlord really has a reason to not actually mail it. And so that's another option that you could do too if you really can't get it in. But if you and it also depends because I think you deal, Jeff, I think you deal more with Southern California, and Southern California is a different beast than what the counties that I'm in. And I'm not including Alameda or San Francisco in that.
Yeah. Well, it's actually no, it was a Northern California
Uh,
case actually. But it's for the whole. It's the US Postal Service, and so just that date being different, and that's such a key distinction. Stand in line versus drop it off in the blue bin. Like that's such a little thing, but it if if it's Memorial Day, like we have coming up, or if and you do it at a certain time, timing sometimes can wreck it. But hopefully not. So
It can, but also keep in mind that mail is actually pretty effective. I mean, we generally get mail within a couple days. So if we're talking about a couple days buffer and when that postmark's actually going to be on, it's within a day or two, it'll be on it.
yeah,
It's just
right. Yeah,
not on it the exact day that you may think that it'll be on it. And so that's what we're talking about. If you need it that exact
exactly.
date, get it done. But if you need it, if it's plus or minus 3 days, then you're probably fine because they'll have it by then.
So if you're a procrastinator and you're waiting to the last day, you have to stand in line.
Yes.
And if you're not a pro and you're just a real pro, then yeah, you can throw it in the
Yes.
blue bin.
Yes,
But that's a
itemized
great.
disposition of security deposit. You are standing in line if it is day 21. Stand in line.
There we go. Well, great. Thank you so much for sharing. And you know, we yeah, we really wanted to make it happen this time around, and so glad that we're able to that you're also available for the live stream. And then this will go out to more people that way, and more people can hear about you. You do great work. Her evictions, I don't know if she mentioned I don't think she mentioned it, but she does flat rate evictions. And that's really, she's going to review it. And if it's a total mess, she may not take you, but she'll tell you what to do, maybe, probably. And anyway, so give her a ring if you need some help. And again, we're so thankful for you. And every time it really shows the experience, the depth of experience that you have. So we're really thankful for you and what you're able to do for the members. And oh, okay, hold on. I missed this last one. Okay, in case of an ongoing unsettled rental claim, can landlord increase rent by less than 5%? Any duration to avoid rent increase to avoid any retaliatory actions.
That does not sound like a general question. It sounds very specific to something that's going on, and you're welcome to email me more details if it's in one of the counties that I serve. So you can email to info@blueprintevictions.com. But what I'm going to guess is there may be a habitability related issue there, and maybe you can't collect rent at all. And so can you increase rent while that's going on? So that tells me that those are the kind of questions I get daily. And that tells
Yeah.
me I need more information from that person versus answering a general information for all.
Yeah, that one definitely is begging for more information.
Yeah.
So, all right. Hey, thanks again, and Michelle. We really appreciate you. Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you. Hopefully, we'll see you tomorrow with Prop 13, the John Kupals. We'll have him speak. That'll be great. And then this whole AB 2042, it's a mess. It is a total mess. If that thing were to pass, could literally unravel default evictions from up to 15 years ago, which is just insane, just insane. And then, like, that would include, if that were unraveled, let's say, then you're talking treble damages, you're talking some serious, serious, serious loss. So take that one seriously. Go to the PAC website again. It's pac.aoausa.com and definitely get involved with that one. And we tell you exactly what to do with it. It's not that we're totally opposing 2042. There's just a little bit of wording that makes it super sneaky and super devastating. It's supposed to be a cleanup bill, so it's not that the whole thing needs to be thrown out. There's just some little traps, and it creates some loopholes in there. So please pay attention to that one. Thanks again, everybody. We'll talk to you.